Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. I'm excited to get started with more training. October 23rd is today. So we've got live training starting with contracting vehicles and going into a lot of good topics this week. So I hope you're with me live all week at noon. Before we get started, I'd like to start with a tip that just is my way of saying thank you to those showing up early and on time. I really appreciate that. When you do, it's good for me as a trainer, right, to be able to have you here with me. But it also is helpful for LinkedIn to put the word out to everybody else that we've got started. When you're engaging in the chat, LinkedIn is pushing it out saying, hey, something's going on in the training. So join Neil and everybody else. And so I appreciate that. My tip for you, ironically, from a book called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, my tip for you is in there, he talks about different types of people, especially as it relates to networking, which is, a world we live in. But he talks about the types of people that are out there, in particular, a connector, right? These people who are connectors, and I feel like I'm a connector in the sense that I know a lot of people. And when somebody is asking for an introduction or I hear where people can come together, I do that. And I was thinking about this, not everybody's a connector, right? You got to be out there engaging a lot. And connectors tend to be engaged in a lot of different networks or want to be. But one thing I would highly encourage you to consider is being a connector for your clients to the information they're trying to reach. And so an example is if you're in cybersecurity and zero trust is an aspect, let's just call it a keyword around cybersecurity at the moment, because not everybody's in cyber. If you're in cybersecurity and you're doing zero trust, then you can begin to build relationships with the top zero trust firms that are out there that are building hardware or software solutions that the government would want to know about. And so if your buyers are able to come to you and learn from you, or maybe get introduced to third-party vendors beyond the government contracting typical world, they'd appreciate that. You're connecting them. So that's my tip for you today is don't operate in a vacuum. If you've got subject matter expertise, whether it's elevators or zero trust architecture and cybersecurity, et cetera, get to know the people your customers would want to get to know, right? You're more of delivering the services type side, even if you're delivering the products, but they want to know those firms that are on the outside. That'll be a good tip for you. All right, let's get rocking and rolling. Let me share my screen for today's. That was just a tip as a way to say thank you to everybody showing up early and on time. Got my slide deck. I just want to share it really quick and we're off to the races. In today's training, we're going to be talking about making contract vehicles work for you. I often hear from people that they get their contract vehicles, but then it disappears, right? Like nothing happens. Ironically, first time I ever heard this was from my brother, who is like, I was in government contracting, got a GSA schedule, but it didn't go anywhere. And so as I began to talk with him and as I began to learn more and more over the last 5-10 years on why vehicles don't work for certain people, generally, it's because we come at it from a wrong expectation. We think when we got the contract vehicle, it's a golden ticket. Similar to like those of us who get 8A certifications, we're like, I hear that an 8A certification is a golden ticket. Well, it kind of is, but you still have to go to the show. For contract vehicles, I like to describe it the difference between a hunting license and a license to farm, right? Many of us are told incorrectly, and not to be mean there, but we just don't see it from the right perspective. We say, it's a hunting license. We can go out and shoot down opportunities. And I understand where that came from, but it really is not hunting. And I'll talk about that in a minute. It's more like farming, right? One is reactive and the other is proactive. And so contracting vehicles are a license to farm for the crops you want. And the crops you want are opportunities. Another way of thinking about it, and I love my little dogs playing poker here, is that it's the ante to get into the game. If you've never played poker before, in order to get into the game, you need to throw in your 25 cents or $25, whatever it is, the ante to be able to get into that hand, right? Not just to sit at the table, but every single hand you have to pay to even begin to play that hand. And contract vehicle is kind of that same way. When you have the contract vehicle, well, now you're in the game. Those of us who don't have the vehicle, we're sitting on the outside watching dogs playing poker, right? So just think of it as the ante to get in, but you still have to be wise in order to win the hand, win the game. All right, so today, as it relates to contract vehicles and especially getting them working for you now that you have them, I want to begin with just breaking down the difference between the hunting and farming aspect or way of looking at a contract vehicle. Second thing I want to cover down on is understanding that some agencies like using your vehicles and some don't, right? I use this term love. You want to be working with the agencies that love your contract vehicle. And I'll talk about that and some tips for you to think about. And then I'm going to wrap up with giving you some tips on how to market your contract vehicle. It's not enough to just have it. You have to now go off and do something with it. And so I'll give you some tips on how you can move forward on that. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you, government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results. That's what I want for your company, for you to have repeatable, predictable results. One thing to keep in mind is that we're not a government affiliated organization. We are completely self-funded. I saw a need, I funded a need. We have sustaining members who help us as well, kind of do some of this training, but really we're a self-funded organization. And I just want you to keep that in mind. Here's an example of one of our sustaining members. I just wanted to do a shout out to one a day as I remember to do it here, but Nina Martin, she does professional services, administrative support, and deaf communication access, so American Sign Language, etc. Give a shout out to Nina and say thanks for being a supporting member, because if you're not a supporting member, but you get value, she's one of the people helping bring this to you every day. And last thing I just want to talk about on this slide is make sure you're engaging in the community. Help buyers remember who you are. Help me and others who are in the chat remember who you are by putting your company name and your core competency, 2 or 3 words that'll tell us what you do. Remember, my tip for today at the beginning was be a connector. Well, I want to be a connector as it relates to your business. So if I hear somebody else saying, hey, I'm looking for somebody who does deaf communication access, I can go, oh, it's Nina, right? And you don't have to be a sustaining member for me to make a recommendation, right? We thank you for that. But I make introductions when I can see them and make them happen. I want you to do that for your customers as well. And the easiest way for all of us to do that is if you tell us who you are, you tell us what you sell, not in a lot of words, just 2 or 3 words. And then in the chat, it's your community. Engage in there. Say hi to people. Tell people you're open to connection. Take people offline and say, hey, let's go connect offline and have a chat. See if there's engagement in there. Remember, it's okay to chat a bunch as you go through, but don't write huge paragraphs because people just won't read it, right? There's chat will fly fast. The way chat works is quick little chats mentioning something, but it's great to engage. Okay. So when you have a contract vehicle, that's the beginning. It's not the end, right? And sometimes we make this mistake of thinking of a contracting vehicle as a hunting license, but it really is not. It's a farming license. And the way you can tell the difference is hunting is a reactive activity. Really, you sit up on a perch and you wait for something to walk by and you shoot it, right? So when we think about government contracting, we get a contract vehicle, and we sit around and we kind of wait for the contract vehicles to come walking onto that vehicle, the opportunities to walk onto that contract vehicle, and then we shoot it by putting it into our pipeline and doing something, right? That's nice, but that's not how it happens. I wish it would happen that way. When you think about a hunting license as a way of seeing contracting vehicles, then you're putting complete control in somebody else's hands. You're putting it in the buyer's hands, for example. When they decide to put something on the vehicle, maybe you can go after it. That's them being in complete control. You have no control when you think about it from a hunting perspective, because you just sit and you hope that deer walks in front of you. If the deer walks behind you, you missed it for the day, right? And so I want you to have control. And that's why when you have a contract vehicle, see it as a license to farm, right? It's a proactive approach to sales in the federal market. When I describe farming, and I'm a good city boy, so I don't really know anything about farming, but I know how to sell. And farming is this idea of first you need to get permission to work that land, right? And that's kind of the contract vehicle that you get. And then once you get permission, you need to start preparing the land. You need to get rid of the big rocks. You need to do whatever you do to the land, like the soil, and till it up and put those little tracks in. You can see how far away from farming I really am. But it basically, right, you prepare the land and then you plant the seeds and you make sure each one of those seeds are ready to start growing. It's a real fragile life when they begin, and opportunities are those seeds. It's kind of that same thing. And that's getting something into your pipeline. You're like, man, I want to pull this through in my contract vehicle. So those seeds that you're planting are opportunities that you're seeing out there that you want to get on your contract vehicle. So you're planting them. And then you begin to care for them. You weed around the plants to make sure nothing is in there, choking it out. Weeding, you might think about trying to do things that is getting rid of your competition. We call this capture, right? This idea of doing what you can to protect that seedling, that opportunity as it's growing. And you water it. You make sure it has the food that it needs. You're engaging. Watering could be things like conversations, building teams, et cetera. And then you wait. And when you prepare land and care for that land and care for that seed as it's growing, as you wait, you're going to see that fruit pop up or that plant pop up. And that's the time for you to harvest it. It's not even done though. There you're harvesting it and you're preparing it for market. You have to take your plants to the market and actually find a buyer, right? So when you think about hunting, you just wait and it lands on your contract vehicle and you just go after it, right? So you're basically responding to RFP. It might as well have been on SAM and GSA or something. But when you're really pushing an opportunity, you're proactively looking for that buyer. You're in control. You're doing everything you can to move this forward, right? I'll talk about this in a minute more about how you can have control. But one thing to really keep in mind is sellers have control. I know we sit there and think buyers have control, but sellers, you have a huge amount of control in here. It doesn't mean that the buyers are abdicating their responsibilities, et cetera, for making sure they get their best needs. It doesn't mean your control is going to bamboozle the buyer into buying something they don't need, but it means you're in control. You're in control of working with the contracting officer in this particular case, because contracting vehicles around the acquisition approach. You're in control of working with that contracting officer, finding that buyer, and then beginning to give them the data and evidence that's needed to put an opportunity on your contract vehicle. So you're making it happen. You're proactively driving opportunity or harvesting opportunities onto your contract vehicle. So let's talk about agencies that love contract vehicles. I say this a lot when I do my training. Find agencies that love you. If you're a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, why would you work with an agency that appears not to award a lot of contracts to service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses? Same thing with woman-owned small businesses, et cetera. The Army is the #1 agency, or the agency that loves 8A small businesses the most. And the way I say that is by FPDS. I go into the Federal Procurement Data System and I look at all the contracts that were awarded in 2023 or 2022, and I can see a massive discrepancy between how often the Army does set-asides and direct awards to 8As compared to every other agency, including Air Force and Navy or anybody else. They're all way below them. The Army is double of anybody. And so when I look at that, I go, well, the Army loves 8A firms. The data and evidence is telling me that. And we can do the same thing as it relates to agencies that love contract vehicles, right? Agencies that use your vehicle and have used it before, they love that contract vehicle. Love is this loose term, right? I don't want you to go get married, but it means that they know how to use it, they do use it, and there's a really, really good chance they'll use it again, compared to agencies that aren't awarding contracts on your contract vehicle. Why keep going in that direction? Why pursue opportunities if the agency isn't using your contract vehicle? So an example here that I put down is the STARS 3 contract vehicle. If you go to the GSA GWAC dashboard, you can look in there and see this data. This is where I get this data, but you can see all the agencies are awarding to 8A on the 8A STARS 3 contract vehicle, and you can see who won on there as well. But DHS is heads and tails above everybody else, and HHS is fairly close up there. Then it's a pretty decent drop down to, like, in 2023, or excuse me, over the life so far, about 100 for Treasury and 60 or something, 70 for USDA. And then it drops drastically down into the 40s and below for every other agency. So if you're a STARS 3 contract holder and you want to maximize your success on the STARS 3 contract vehicle, you can go somewhere and convince them to use your contract vehicle. That's one way. Or you can go somewhere where you don't have to convince them to use your contract vehicle. You just have to show up and say that your solution can address their needs, right? You don't have to talk to them about the vehicle because they already believe in the vehicle. And I'll talk more about that in a second, but that's really important to track on that. Same thing with any other contract vehicle. You can go dig into different tools like, you can use FPDS. This is where I go. Sometimes it's the raw data. A tool that I happen to pay for that you can decide to pay for or not is GovTribe, right? So I use that particular tool. I like it because of what it provides. But here's something I just want to show you as an example with GovTribe, and I have no affiliation with GovTribe. I would love to, happy to take their money, but I have none. I just like their tool. Agencies that love Oasis, right? If you look at this over the last year, and that's last 12 months, these are the agencies based on just graphical size that have awarded that $7 billion on Oasis. So here you can tell Oasis is a DoD contract vehicle. They love it. Even here, that's DoD. And then you go to DHS, which is actually pretty huge because when you think about it, DHS has FEMA and Coast Guard, and those are kind of equivalent to Air Force or Navy or something. But that entire Department of Homeland Security is shrunk far below these guys. So this is Oasis, right? And you can see all these smaller ones. But look at this next slide. This is another contract vehicle, but it's a pool, if you will. So it's Oasis Small Business. In this one, you see the difference? Air Force, let me just go back and forth for 1 second. This is full and open Oasis, where it's Army, Air Force, and Navy are fairly spread across. But when you go to small business, Homeland Security jumps ahead of Army and Navy. Actually, I don't even know where Navy went, like way down here to this teeny little thing. But so the Navy likes Oasis for large business, full and open. But the Air Force apparently is a big fan of Oasis Small Business. This is what I want you to do, is to take a look at your vehicle and take the time to go research which agencies are using my contract vehicle. This is what I do with my customers. I got several customers that have multiple contract vehicles. And when I talk to them, I'm like, let's not go everywhere and try to create a new space to go into. Let's see who's using your vehicles and buying what you sell and double down on that. We don't have to convince them to use your contract vehicle. So this is the same slide I was on a minute ago where I was saying I use GovTribe. Do me a favor, this red box, throw into the chat the contract vehicles you have, all of them, right? If you have GSA or Navy Seaport or Seaport Next Gen or Oasis, any of those, put them down. Would you let everybody else know? But I also want to be able to know. Even if I don't have it memorized, I'll come back to this training. I had somebody ask me about Oasis Small Business, ironically. So if any of you are on Oasis Small Business, put that in. They're looking for a teaming partner. But this way, I just go back in and go, oh, hey, Johnny said that he's on this vehicle. Okay, so going back to how do you find these agencies, some more ways of thinking about how do you find these agencies that love your contract vehicle, that use your contract vehicle. There's certain factual things that happen that when you start learning about them and pursuing them, you can create a strategy around success of the contract vehicles you have. So the first thing I would do is make sure you're talking with the contract vehicle program team. Every contract vehicle has somebody running it, right? Some of them are very obvious. You go in like Seaport Next Gen or NASA Soup, right? These contract vehicles, NASA Soup in particular, you can see the program manager. She's often out there talking, very visible, always sharing lessons. And so you have this chance to go out and meet somebody like that to ask some of this information I'm sharing if it's hard to find it in FPDS. But any vehicle you have, including your GSA contract vehicles, go find out who's driving those vehicles so that you can ask success. Don't go talk to them and say, hey, can you help me win business? That's not their job. Navy Seaport has like 1,800 contract holders. They're not here to help you with one little thing. But if you want to ask them a broad question, like, I went and looked at this before I did training, but I didn't do a slide. I can look at Seaport Next Gen and go, which subordinate commands are using it? An example of one that surprised me was Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane, Indiana. They were like in the top 5 of Seaport Next Gen contract vehicle. I was like, wow, that's interesting. And so as a contract holder, I might go in and go, well, why? What are they awarding on that vehicle at Crane? Is this a place for me to match? And then I could go in and talk to the small business specialist and ask them, hey, let me talk to you about this vehicle and what's going on with it. You're not going in to get an opportunity driven to a sale. You're going in to learn how to use your vehicle and how to work with that customer. So in the middle of my slide here, I talk about delegation of procurement authority. There's various ways people might talk about it. I'm not sure, trying to pretend like I'm the absolute contract vehicle expert, but I do play one for my own business, right? Delegation of procurement authority is basically permission to use a contract vehicle. Perfect example is STARS 3. When I thought about pushing an initiative to help STARS 3 contract holders get more opportunities going there, I stood up a plan. It just didn't go anywhere because no one wanted to do it. But what I learned was that you can't use a contract vehicle unless you have a DPA. And so what you want to do is to find out, are there those restrictions on your contract vehicle? And then go find out, are the very people you're trying to sell to, a particular agency, a particular contracting shop, are they using the vehicle? And then do they have DPAs? Does everybody have the DPA? If you see an opportunity that you're tracking in your pipeline, that should be one of your questions. If I'm trying to push it to Oasis Small Business, does that contracting officer even have the ability to use that or use STARS 3? So when you talk with the program office team at for your contract vehicle, you'll learn more in depth. Some of these you can just go online and they have great details. And then when you're talking to the program office team, I would just ask, who's using it the most if you're not able to find it in FPDS easily. So I put in here that this activity that I'm talking about, finding out what contracting or what agencies love your contract vehicle, this is business development and this is capture, right? Business development's responsibility is to understand an agency, build relationships, and identify opportunities. And so when you think about your contract vehicles, you want to be seeing which agencies, going back to Seaport Next Gen. If I'm going into the Navy, why would I pursue a systems command that doesn't really use the contract vehicle I want? I don't know if this is still the fact, but a couple of years ago when I was tracking on Seaport Next Gen, I learned that NavAir was like, now we're using our own stuff. We're not really going to use that, right? That might not be the case today. But my point was that was a vital piece of information from a business development standpoint. It's like, well, why would we pursue that? Let's go over to NavC, which is using the contract vehicle that we have. And their contracting officers have the DPA, the Delegation of Procurement Authority. They've gone through the training and they've got approval to use that vehicle. And so business development is tracking on that. And then capture, when you're trying to push an opportunity somewhere, you generally are pushing it to your contract vehicles. You need to be able to talk to your target customer and find out, do you even have the ability to use it? So the last thing I said here was kind of what I started with, and just keep this in mind. If the contracting officer or the KOCO, if they're not using your contract vehicle, right? If they're not awarding on it already, if they don't have DPA, then why are you there, right? Why are you knocking on their door, or why do you have that vehicle, right? If that agency is your target, then why do you have the vehicle? Why don't you get a vehicle that they actually use? And so you want to do those two things, either follow where your vehicle will lead or get the vehicles in the agency that you want. So I talked about GovTribe. That's something else I can do. I just say HHS and it tells me the top contract vehicles used. And I can begin to look at them. How can I get on them as a sub or as a prime? All right, something to keep in mind there. Here, I want to wrap up with some tips on how to market your contract vehicle, right? One of the things to keep in mind about a contract vehicle, and Sam is the same way. If you see an opportunity on the contract vehicle, it's pretty sure that somebody else drove it there. That's really important to remember. It's, there's this line that says, when you see it on Sam, it's too late. I don't personally believe that. I believe that it might be too late. But when you see it on Sam, generally, your competitors have seen it long before that. And when you see it on a contract vehicle, your competitors have seen it long before. STARS 3 is a classic example. There's almost no visibility in STARS 3 until something hits, right? And so what you want to do is to get engaged early, so you're the one putting an opportunity onto STARS 3, onto your contract vehicles, and your competitors going, I wonder who put that there, like who drove that there. We call this shifting left. And let me just pop ahead for 1 second. Shifting left in the acquisition lifecycle. So this lifecycle here, this happens to be USDA's, but the lifecycle is fairly standard in the federal government for the acquisition and procurement approach, right? And so you see all these steps. This part here with the arrow is the part I want you to keep in mind. At this point, the acquisition strategy formation, this step in their life cycle, this is where they're beginning to say which contract vehicle. I know some contracting officers might say, oh, it's later, it's earlier, whatever. The acquisition strategy formation, when we're forming our acquisition strategy, that's the point where they begin to kind of put things down. My point is, everywhere before is where you want to be. You want to be engaged earlier in this life cycle, which no contracting officer will disagree with. The earlier you are in the life cycle, the more chance you have to influence them in the direction you want to go, right? Influence is a big word, right? We're not manipulating a KO or a CO. We're just trying to encourage them to go to a certain NAICS, encouraging them to use certain set-asides, encouraging them to use certain contract vehicles. If we give them enough data and evidence, they will do it if they want, right? But the point is, when I say shift left, you want to get in here where there's draft activity going on, market research, forecast, etc. You'll see this in the previous slide here. Shift left and engage early, right? You want to respond to those sources sought. Definitively is when I say definitively, what I mean is don't be wishy-washy. Please put it on T4 Next Gen or Seaport Next Gen or whatever, right? Say I want it on Oasis Small Business, or not I want, but say it in a nice way. But only ask for it to go on one vehicle. If you're asking for multiple vehicles, you begin to open up the door. I say this the same thing with your set aside. Be careful asking for something to be set aside for two things. Just pick the one you want it to go on and drive it. For example, 8A or HUBZone or 1 million small business. When you give them two, they almost always won't make a choice. They'll just move on. But if you do one, they'll kind of check it off. And so you want to track on that the same way with your contracting vehicles. Give them a definitive reason. This should be a recurring or reusable piece of content that you have for sources sought, for RFIs. Well, it's too late for RFPs, right? But sources sought during the market research, when you're responding, talk to them about this vehicle. And I'll talk about that in a second. Actually, let me jump ahead. One of the things that goes with that is I say, build a slide that highlights the value of your vehicle. Not only for them, but you need to know what's in it for the government for them to use this vehicle. Could be it's cost them less, maybe it's 1% less or whatever. It's easier for them to compete. They only need to get 3 bids and they're off to the races. If you don't know this, the value of a contract vehicle is these vendors have basically already been vetted compared to an opportunity that comes out with no contract vehicle and it's just bids coming back. They have to evaluate so much more. But if they go off of a contract vehicle like GSA or Seaport Next Gen or whatever, there's less work. And so when you build a slide, highlight the value of the vehicle and keep in mind what they would think is valuable, not what you think is valuable. Why is it valuable to use this? And if you don't know, go find a contracting officer that you're friends with and ask them, hey, why would you want to use this, right? You can build that together. And then another tip I was talking about is how you can push opportunities to your vehicle and how you can market your contract vehicle is look at the agency forecast. I've got the Department of Commerce for a particular customer of mine, and they want to go after that. So we're scrubbing through the forecast for 2024, and there's opportunities in there that are early in the process. And so we're going to go in there and pursue those opportunities and see if they will push them to a certain contract vehicle. Again, this is capture. You want to hear early enough that, no, we're going to a vehicle you're not even on. All right, abandoned, right? But if I can push it to the vehicle I want, then that's very good capture. All right, and so I already talked about its BD and capture. Last thing to remember, just on marketing your contract vehicle, forget about the program office, right? They're the requirement. They're the technical scope. The market, the contract vehicle is only, you only need to talk to contracting officers. And whenever I say contracting officers, I mean their team. So the contracting officer, contract specialist, they're all the same to me in that group. They make the decisions. Of course, the KO is the signature, right? But they make the decisions. And so as fast as you can, find those people, build a relationship. And in this vein of shifting left, make sure you're digging your well before you're thirsty. Make sure you build your relationships with contracting officers you'd like to work with at a particular agency. Make sure you're building those relationships early so you can be talking to them about your company and your contract vehicle. What's it take to get on that contract vehicle and move it over? Okay, so here's what I want you to remember. First off, contracting officer is the focus of power. So when it relates to getting more opportunities on your vehicle, to having more success in marketing your contract vehicle, it's all about the contracting officer / specialist. The second thing I want you to remember is engage early, shift early or shift left in that acquisition lifecycle that I showed you. Get involved in the market research or even earlier when it was just a forecasted opportunity or an idea in somebody's head. The task I want to leave with you is if you have a contract vehicle and you're trying to increase your success on it, go find and then meet with the contract vehicle program manager. Talk to them about what I just talked to you in this training and say, what advice do you have for us? When you do that, you will start turning that vehicle into an asset rather than more of a drain or a pain for you. Hey, if you're interested in working with us and when you're ready to work with me, just check out GovConChamber.com. You can learn how to work with us. I'd love to talk to you about how my team and I can help you accelerate your success in the federal market. For all of us, as you go into the day, just remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.